Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I'm Andrew Scaff. He's Mike Werman. We're going to talk today about the Chiefs roster positions. Before we get into that, what is your beverage of choice for today's show?
Glad you asked, Andrew. Uh, I'm drinking as usual. I'm drinking an old German.
Old German.
Old German. Once the now it's made in Pittsburgh, and where the old Rolling Rock factory was, the glass line tanks of Old Latrobe, which once
Does Rolling Rock not exist anymore?
Rolling Rock is now made in St. Louis because Anheuser-Busch bought it. And so now if you get a Rolling Rock bottle or whatever, it says made in St. Louis, Missouri, rather than Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
The worst place in the state, right?
St. Louis or Latrobe.
I can go St. Louis. I don't know anything about Latrobe.
You know, there is a world famous athlete who is now deceased from Latrobe, also associated with a beverage.
Okay. Enlighten me.
This is Arnold Palmer. He was of his courses.
Yeah.
He was from Latrobe, PA. It's outside Pittsburgh, sort of old steel mining type town that's outside of Pittsburgh. And now they make Iron City beer there, and also Old German and some other
German.
Yeah, but Old German, it was once made in Cumberland, Maryland, which was known as the Queen City, because it was once the second largest city in Maryland.
Wow.
Much like
where does it fall now, though?
It's pretty small, but Maryland, the way they have cities, a lot of their cities are not technically cities. It's weird to become incorporated as a city, I think, in Maryland. So like some of the bigger places, like even like Silver Spring and stuff like that, might not count technically as cities, but like boroughs or something. I don't know exactly how they do it. It's
unincorporated.
Yeah, I was doing like a Sporkle quiz, for the top cities or whatever, and I couldn't figure out how Maryland calculated it.
Have you played that game? Have you seen this game called GeoGuessr? Have you seen that at all?
Is that like the Wordle?
No, it gives an image and you have to try to guess where it is. It's just off of nothing but the image itself. So you can sort of like zoom in on different areas and see if you can figure out something. Or if you do like the world ones, then some of them can be pretty difficult. But you might be able to spot like a street sign or something and at least tell what language it is. And guess there. And then you get points based on how many miles or kilometers, depending on how you've set it.
Interesting.
From where your guess is to like where the actual location was.
That seems somewhat familiar because I used to read. Andrew Sullivan used to have a blog where he would have viewers write in and take pictures out their window, and they would be called the View from Their Window contest.
Whoa.
And people would try to guess and where that place was from that window picture.
That's cool. Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to that. So
same idea. I don't know, but and it's not like it's the most original, unique idea ever, but maybe it was inspired by that. What are you drinking today?
Today I'm drinking something I wasn't expecting anyway. First taste was not quite what I thought. Anyway, this is a Blue Moon. It is specifically the mango wheat, which I'm not necessarily a big mango fan. So it's fine though. It seems it is drinkable.
When I mentioned the Iron City beer, they have a mango flavor as well that comes out this summer. So I enjoyed it when I had it. My girlfriend MJ did not enjoy it when she drank it, so she has more manly tastes, I think, than I have when it comes to beer. But
normally, if I would have noticed that it said mango, and I would have said hard pass, but it seems okay. But
its packaging was confusing enough to get you to buy it.
From here, it just looks like Blue Moon. So.
Well, it's the same color, isn't it? Maybe
I think so. I think it's the same.
I don't know. I don't see colors that well, so
even on can labels.
Yeah.
Not the you're thinking about your like.
Oh, I see races from a mile away, but I colors of advertising or clothing, things like that are very difficult for me to see. Also, I'm not that racist, but
medically, medical condition.
Yes. It's part of my Tourette's syndrome where I have to call it out.
Right. It's like Tourette's with the eyes.
Yeah. On that note.
So should we recap what from our first talk on this? We went through a couple of positions of the Chiefs roster, predicting who's going to make the finished final roster. How have we done so far, Mike? We went through quarterbacks, running backs. How are we doing?
So far, so good. It seems like although there's been a little bit of development, I would say, in the weeks since we've done that, in the fact that we have some players maybe who are challenging for roster positions that were maybe not thought to be, and maybe some veterans who might be on the roster bubble. Quarterbacks, when we first visited this topic, there were 4 quarterbacks in camp: Patrick Mahomes, Chad Henne, Shane Buechele, and Dustin Crum, undrafted free agent. Buechele was also an undrafted free agent last year. Crum has been released in the early cuts, which I don't think surprised anybody. We thought perhaps maybe he could latch onto the practice squad, depending on what happens elsewhere. But Shane Buechele has been playing pretty well in the preseason. He's been throwing some touchdown passes. He's been showing some scrambling ability. Whereas I think Chad Henne, the veteran, hasn't shown a whole lot.
He hasn't really played a whole lot though either. I think they kind of know what they had from him, so I don't think they were really focusing on seeing what he was capable of doing in this preseason, at least. They already know.
Yeah, I know, but he also has a decent sized salary of, I think, $3 million or so. He's making $3 million this year. Maybe
it sounded like that may be due to him whether or not he makes a roster or not. So
yeah, I
may as well have him, I guess.
I think if they cut, but when it comes to roster spots, you only have 53, and if you really want somebody to stay, maybe that's not out of the question, because maybe Buechele has played his way onto the roster. Carrying 3 quarterbacks would bump somebody else off the roster, and maybe they would say, well, Henne is somebody that's probably not going to latch on anywhere. Maybe he would as a backup, but why not? He might just be available to be pulled off the street if they need a backup. But I would say that I don't know. I don't think there's any real benefit in keeping Henne. I think if Mahomes goes down, that's pretty bad for the Chiefs. And Buechele, at least, why even bring quarterbacks like Buechele in if you don't think you're ever going to need to use them? I would say, yeah, I think it's a question of, are they going to keep Buechele, or are they going to maybe get rid of Henne as well, and just keep the 2 quarterbacks? Matt Nagy is back. Eric Bieniemy's in the quarterback room. So is Andy Reid. I don't know if you need just another veteran guy out there. Mahomes is the veteran now. Maybe he can mentor Buechele if it comes to that. I would personally give it. Henne played sort of well in the Cleveland Browns playoff game. He ended up icing that game with the pass to Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago, but he's not a world beater.
Right. And usually, I think typically too, if you have an opportunity, you have to move to a second quarterback. You don't go from a mobile quarterback to an immobile quarterback as your backup. More of a pocket passer. It's usually the other way. If you start with a relatively stable pocket passer, your backup guy is going to be somebody that's going to either be exactly the same or be totally different. But
yeah,
you don't go backwards anyway.
Yeah, I think you don't want the defense to say, now we can just tee up on the quarterback. We can rush the passer every down, and if he can't move very well, he's just going to get sacked all the time.
Right.
We want somebody who can navigate that, because there's going to be increased pressure on the quarterback, because they're going to blitz more if it's a backup.
Right.
A non-backup for sure, I would say, because the starters they're more trained against the blitz, and they can move around and feel. And Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz anyway.
Right.
So if you're going to blitz somebody, maybe Buechele is a better person to have out there because he can at least scramble around for a little bit. Henne, he wasn't immobile. He wasn't Dan Marino back there, but he's on, was he 37, something like that? He's approaching our age.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time to cut bait. But Reed is known for his loyalty and usually for sticking around with guys for too long rather than getting rid of them too early. You could see that with some of the defensive players last year.
Yeah. For this, it doesn't really matter. I think if they keep him or don't keep him, they're going to have to pay him anyway, I think, right? So you may as well just have them, I think, unless there's some reason to not. And I don't think there's a reason to not have him at this point. If he ends up becoming a starter because of an injury or something, and then all of a sudden he's not performing well, I think they'll cut him like immediately, right? And they'll move on to somebody else.
Well, they'll bench him at least. I don't think they cut him because then I think it also depends on whether Buechele will be picked up by some other team or not.
Yeah,
because
they seem to be relatively comfortable with him though from the preseason games. He started one of the games, right? So
yeah, at the end of last year, the Cardinals were having some injury troubles with Kyler Murray going down, some of his backups getting hurt too. So they were the Cardinals were ready to pick Buechele off the Chiefs practice squad, put on the active roster, and so the Chiefs actually had him on the 53 a few weeks at the end of the season. So they might do that. I could see them doing that again. So I think I'm leaning more now that the Chiefs are going to keep 3 quarterbacks because I would get rid of Henne. And save that spot for somebody else and maybe keep Henne around in a kind of advisory role if he doesn't latch on someplace else, and that he could come back if need be because he knows the offense and he's been playing. I don't see that happening because it's like throwing $3 million out the window, and
they've already thrown it away, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know.
They may as well if they keep him, they might at least have a chance to like have him do something. If they get rid of him, then they've totally wasted it.
Yeah. So I think they keep all 3.
Yeah.
What do you think, Andrew?
I don't see any other way around it right now anyway. So
but that could impact what they do with the running backs if they keep 3 quarterbacks.
We
also have a question of 4 running backs that are really decent choices, I think. I don't think any of them are kind of all world choices, but I think all 4 of them have been decent. You want to transition over to the running backs?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, in the last couple preseason games, though, Pacheco has been really good, and Ronald Jones was great in the last game too. So
yeah, and you brought him as a free agent.
Yeah,
are you probably predicting him to be the backup or the kind of 1A running back with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? You also brought back Jerick McKinnon. So there's 4 guys: Pacheco, the 7th round draft pick; McKinnon, the sort of playoff star that the Chiefs had at the end of the season; Ronald Jones, who had a very successful career, at least at the beginning of a career at Tampa until he was replaced by Leonard Fournette, which again, Fournette's one of the better backs in the league. So it's not like saying, Jones isn't talented. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a 1st round draft pick who's been hurt a lot, hasn't really lived up to the hype, hasn't been quite as good as some other picks of some other running backs of that draft class, like Jonathan Taylor or somebody like that. But he's not going anywhere either. This is kind of a make or break season probably for Edwards-Helaire. The Chiefs have a 5th-year option that they can give him, but they'll probably want to see how well he does here this season. So
and then they recently released Fleet Davis too, right?
Yeah, Fleet Davis, who was never probably a serious candidate for the roster. They also released Dirk Gore on an injury settlement. He is somebody who played for the Chiefs last year at times. He's probably a practice squad candidate. He broke his thumb, and they originally just designated him injured reserve, but then they decided to give him an injury settlement, which means he could come back to the Chiefs at some point this year. He could be picked up by another team, or he could land on the practice squad.
It sounded like they were interested in trying to retain him in some way.
Yeah,
because he did pretty well last year. I think so.
Yeah. But he's not going to be on the active roster, at least at the beginning of the season. So we have 4 running backs.
But because of injury and then a technicality for salary wise, I think, right, it was just to sort of stash him away, basically, right? I think you can do it this way.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that so the question right now is whether Ronald Jones keeps his spot, because Pacheco has been a little bit better than what people thought. I think 7th round draft pick, has some kick returning ability.
Was he returning kicks in preseason games, or was I saw like Skye Moore was returning kicks?
Skye Moore returned some punts, I think.
Yeah.
Cory Coleman.
Yeah, Coleman. I saw
returned some stuff. I think Pacheco did as well.
Pacheco should have like elite speed though, right? Isn't that what is?
Yeah, he's very fast and he's pretty powerful. He doesn't necessarily seem to have the best vision, although he showed a little bit more vision last preseason game. The same game that Jones kind of had some good runs in as well. So it's hard to say. But Pacheco, they're probably not. He's a draft pick. They're probably not going to get rid of him.
Yeah,
because again, he's gotten kind of a lot of publicity in camp, and some other teams are probably going to pick him up, and he's. So I would say, the Chiefs keep 3 or 4 running backs. They're going to keep Edwards-Helaire. They're going to keep McKinnon.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to keep Pacheco. Do you think they keep Ronald Jones as well? I'd say they'd be more likely to keep Ronald Jones if they only had 2 quarterbacks, because that's an extra roster spot. But
right, yeah. Well, I think they'll end up. I recently seen talk about him being like potentially traded too, depending on what's out there. I think for availability. But like he's supposed to be one of the people to watch. I think at the end of the cuts here, that the potential for him to be traded was relatively high, at least anyway. But
yeah, the Chiefs have done that before too. Carlos Hyde, you might remember from a couple of years ago, was traded. Was it to Houston?
That sounds right.
Before the roster cuts, so the Chiefs have done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think might be wise, but then for draft picks or for future or for other positions of need. But I could also see them keeping Jones because he's a good running back. He's had 98-yard touchdown runs in the league, so that's something probably that Edwards-Helaire will never have. He doesn't have that breakaway speed.
Right. They may keep Pacheco on, but have him be in like a kick return role initially, just to see if there's going to be any injuries in the first couple of weeks, and then shuffle the roster again based on how that plays out. There may not be a lot of snaps for all these guys in the running game, though. I mean, they're not run heavy anyway, so keeping 4 running back seems crazy, but I mean, if they can get some like hybrid use out of them with another position, then they're going to be worth it.
McKinnon, they can line up out wide. He's good pass catching too, so they could use these as receivers as well. I'm not sure what they do. I was thinking pretty certainly that they probably were going to get rid of Ronald Jones the way things were going, but Jones looked pretty good in the last preseason game. Although that may have been the way that the Chiefs wanted to showcase him to see what other teams might want.
Right. I'm sure they're going to weigh all options that they can, at least too. But
yeah,
I think they'll find a way to keep him if they don't trade him. I think is pretty much what it's going to end up being. I don't think they'll just release him. I think it'll be a trade or he'll be on the roster.
I think so too. I think they're trying to get something for him. So he's either traded or on the roster. I would say I'd say that's probably 90% likely one of those two. Maybe a small. They're going to try to sneak him onto the practice squad. I don't think that's going to happen.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
How about, should we move on to wide receivers?
Wide receivers, yeah. This is a interesting group as well. I think the Chiefs have several players that they know are going to be on the roster, but there's a lot of people on the bubble.
Like 4 that are like locked, right? And then
probably. I would say probably, and then
maybe 5 even.
Maybe 5 by this point with the way Justin Watson has been playing.
Yeah.
So the 4 locks, of course, would be the new 2nd-round draft pick, Skye Moore, a former second-round draft pick in Nicole Hardman, the only experienced receiver really left from last year.
Experience for Chiefs experience, at least.
Yeah, it's only with Chiefs experience. Yeah, the two free agent signings, Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster, of course, are experienced for other teams, the Packers and the Steelers, but not for the Chiefs. But they're going to play for sure. They're locked in as starters. So those are the four: Skye Moore, Nicole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Marquez Valdez.
What about Josh Gordon?
That's the question, I think. As he hasn't really shown a lot in the preseason. He doesn't seem like he plays a lot of special teams. But he was once an elite receiver in this league. He's been with the Chiefs now in over a year. Do they find room for him?
Did he come in mid-season? He came in mid-season, didn't he, last year?
Yeah, he came in like week 3 or 4 or early.
I don't think he got into games until a few weeks later, though, even, right? But I don't think he really played a whole lot with the Chiefs.
Yeah, he didn't catch a lot of balls. He didn't seem like things went very well for him. Like some of his early passes, when he had one deflected off of him and went for an interception, and so he was kind of star-crossed. But he's a potential roster keeper. The fifth receiver, though, seems to be right now with Justin Watson. The way he's played in the preseason, Mahomes has raved about him. He's pretty fast. He used to play for Tampa, like Ronald Jones. So I think Justin Watson probably stays as a fifth, and then that makes the number 6 spot. They'll probably keep 6 receivers rather than, because they run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. I don't see them keeping more than 6.
Right. Chances are at least one of these guys will end up on the practice squad.
Yeah. Again, maybe Josh Gordon would take a spot on the practice squad.
May not be able. I don't know if can you put, because of a certain number of NFL experience.
You can't have a number of veterans on the practice squad now. They changed some of those rules after COVID, so I think you can have 16 players. I think maybe 4 or 8 can be veterans. I'm not quite sure what the number is, but he might also want to pack it up and go someplace else if he thinks he can still play.
So you think another potential trade option then, or just
yeah, it could be a trade. Somebody else wants to take Josh Gordon, or maybe he'll just get a spot in the roster. I don't know. The special Dave Tobe, the special teams guy, likes wide receivers who can also return kicks and punts. So that's or be gunners on punt units, things like that. So some people have said that Dory's Fountain might be the 6th receiver. Cory Coleman, maybe. We also have 5th-round draft pick last year, who was on the practice squad last year, Cornell Powell, who has shown some promise this camp as well, from observers had mentioned. Jermaine Ely, probably, who's sort of hybrid running back wide receiver, is probably going to be on the practice squad at best. So I would say he's gone. But we have like 9 players really vying for 6 spots. And almost it seems that at least 4 of them, maybe 5 of them, are certainties. So who would you keep? Would you keep Gordon over Fountain, Powell, or Coleman?
I mean, I think they're gonna keep Josh Gordon, but that's my expectation. I don't know if I would keep him necessarily, but I think they're going to.
Okay.
But I think Fountain will be on special teams though, so I think they'll use him like on the kick defenses and stuff like that.
They think they'll keep 7 receivers.
I mean, whether is he going to be classified as a receiver or is it going to be special teams? I guess they don't really keep special teams separate, right? It's like I think they'll.
Well, the special teams guys would just be
from the pool of players that are on assigned other positions, right?
Yeah.
But
or they'd be Harrison Butker, Tommy Townsend,
just the
specialists,
right?
Specialists, yeah.
So yeah, I think like you said, the Ely practice squad.
I think a lot of these guys are going to be practice squad. They're going to keep. I don't think any of them necessarily are going to latch on to a.
It seemed like Coleman maybe kick returner, but it'd be hard to keep multiple guys around, like specifically as kick returners initially if they're not also have a spot in the as a wide receiver too. So I don't know. I don't know that he has a position there right now.
Yeah, that's why I think Gordon might be out because the special team because he doesn't really play special teams. So it might be Fountain or Coleman.
It seems like they like Fountain though too. I don't know.
They do like Fountain. I'm not quite sure why they like Fountain. But
Yeah.
Usually special teams guys they have those guys that they like, and so maybe Fountain might sneak that sixth spot.
Salary wise, Gordon isn't due any more than Fountain is. He's actually getting $70,000 less than Doris Fountain.
Really?
And Cory Coleman both actually are at $965K.
And so he's at 895. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
And Ely is 708. Cornell Powell 705. So I mean, those it seems like by how their salaries are set anyway, the cuts would be the like Watson, Ely, Powell would be out. Gordon would be right on the edge, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they'd keep Fountain for more of a special teams guy, but have him listed as a wide receiver. But yeah.
For what it's worth, on the Chiefs unofficial depth chart on Chiefs.com, Juju and Marquez Valdez-Scantling are listed as the first team wide receivers. Skye Moore, Mecole Hardman as second team. Justin Watson and Doris Fountain are seen as the third team, with Gordon, Powell, Coleman, and Ely as fourth stringers.
Really?
Yeah. So they also have Fountain ahead of any of those guys, except for Watson, maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he plays on the outside, on punts. Well, he did last year anyway, right?
Yeah. So yes, I think they might want to keep Fountain. I don't know. Again, you need those guys, but I think in some ways, special teams, it's important not to screw up, but it's also not as important because really you shouldn't be punting as often as they punt. They shouldn't be punting as often as they punt. They should go in for
anyway.
And they should punt out of bounds more rather than punt to a person. So you don't need somebody downing the ball. You don't need somebody returning because you don't want anybody to return it because you don't want to create a risk of a big return. You want to kick it away from whoever is returning. It's one of those things where there's very little. I guess if you play it really well, you can create a turnover. If you cause a muff or a fumble or something like that on the returner, but you can also have a big return against you. And
right, it's a risky play always.
Yeah. And kickoffs, you should probably want to have a touchback every time. You don't want these things to happen. The only, I would say, the kicking game. It's one of those things where you have to have it. That's why it's still called football, but I would avoid it as much as possible, and that would make me minimize some of those kind of gunner downer roles.
Right.
But that's not how the Chiefs probably think. They still like to have big returns, and things like that. So maybe Fountain is good at blocking on the outside for the punt return. Things like that. So I think they'll keep Fountain, even though I would say I think offensive prowess should be the priority, and then special teams just do whatever you can. But that's not, I don't think, how a lot of teams work. It's not how the Chiefs work.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that Gordon's still around now seems like they have some reason to want to try to give him a second chance, basically, right, in the league.
Yeah, they could have cut him early because he's a veteran. They thought, well, maybe we'll build a latch on someplace else.
Yeah.
And we'll give you that much. And yeah, they haven't done that. There's still the possibility they'll bring somebody else in. I don't know. Odell Beckham Jr. is still out there.
That's true. You think they're in the running for OBJ?
For two OBJs because Orlando Brown Jr. as well. I don't really think so, but they have some cap. They have a little bit of cap room, and if he wants to take a very low salary for almost guaranteed playoff spots, maybe he'd do that. But because the Chiefs don't, I think the Chiefs have a lot of talent at wide receiver. They don't have high-end talent like they did with Tyreek available, but they have a lot of mid to upper level talent now. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is really good. I think all the scaling can be pretty good. I think Hardman's going to be a lot better without Hill around. Skye Moore might be pretty good as well. So like they have, I'd say, several average to above average receivers, which they didn't have last year. I don't think. I think they had kind of below average options after Hill.
When especially the way the season started, like Nicole Hardman, he was like a risk, an adventure every time he touched the ball. There were lots of like drop passes, fumbles. It was not looking very good for him last season, and then but he got it together though. I'd be pretty impressed with how he recovered.
Yeah,
half of the year and in the playoffs, he was great at towards the end of the season and really reliable too. So
yeah, he became much better, and this was
man,
sort
it
of
was
the
an
case.
adventure to start the
He
season.
was often, of any of the receivers, he was the one who's most likely to be not on the same page as Mahomes. It seems like you can see that in the Super Bowl that they lost. Hardman missed some routes. He dropped some passes, and I think as you said, he really came on the second half of last season, and so
something clicked apparently for him personally. Must have, right? Because I mean,
he was drafted to be Tyreek Hill basically because they weren't sure of Hill's availability,
right,
due to his off the field lawsuit issues, which, to be fair, seem like now in hindsight don't seem to be all his creation. But he has had a troubled off the field career, and now seems to be a bit disgruntled that the Chiefs let him go, given his comments about the Chiefs organization, about Patrick Mahomes, about Tua Tagovailoa, and things like that. But receivers, I think, I think their kid will keep 6, and 5 seem fairly certain that one spot is up for grabs. And if Andrew Stafford had the Chiefs, he would pick Josh Gordon.
I think they'll have him. I don't know that if I was running a team, I don't know but they must know something. It seems like if they were going to get rid of him, they would have already done it.
Yeah.
So I think they wouldn't have brought him into camp even if they didn't want him there, right? So it seems like they want him there.
Okay.
It may just be like who's healthiest at the time too, as to whether or not he makes it on the roster to start with, or if they end up releasing him. But
yeah,
it seems like they're going to keep him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they'll keep Fountain, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would keep. I don't think I would keep Fountain. I might go with Cory Coleman because I think he has more.
Do you think they'll end up keeping an extra wide receiver on the roster than what you normally expect? It sounds like they may keep one fewer tight end, I guess, right?
If you one fewer tight end, they could keep only 3 running backs. They could keep only two quarterbacks. Then there might be room for all these receivers. It's hard to say because I'm sure there'll be some 4 receiver sets and things like that. So
it'd be hard to think that they wouldn't have lots of 4 receiver sets.
Yeah,
that was their standard sort of offense last year, right?
Yeah, well, Kelsey would be one of those receivers probably.
Yeah,
4 wides. And maybe one of the other tight ends. I think Fortson, especially Gray. Why don't we start talking about the tight ends because we have some good options here as well. I think, although injuries have depleted the tight ends position, there are 6 tight ends currently on the Chiefs roster. They need to cut some of those to get down to the 53. We know Travis Kelsey's not going to be cut. We know that
would be a shocker.
Noah Gray probably is not going to be cut. 5th draft pick last year, seen as the kind of newer up and comer, coming kind of all around tight end. Maybe not the receiver that Kelsey is, but maybe more of a blocker, I think. And Jody Fortson, who was injured last year, made the squad last year, but was injured, had a horrible. Was it Achilles injury last year?
Sounds right.
Or knee of some sort. But he has been a big target in preseason games. He's caught multiple touchdown passes from Patrick Mahomes, and from other quarterbacks, I believe. So he's going to be on the roster. The question mark right now is whether Blake Bell is going to stay on or not because he's been hurt. He has a hip injury that has required some surgery, and whether he's going to go on injured reserve or become a kind of person they'll kind of try to bring back at some point. If he goes on IR right now, he's going to miss the whole season.
Right. Well, there's the PUP list though too, right? For some
Yeah.
amount of time? Can you kind of stash somebody that way?
Yeah, but I think you have to have that person on your 53 before you can do the pup list.
Okay, so they'd have to roster him and then move him to the other list, and then they could bring someone else on.
Yeah, or they'd roster him. Maybe they would actually move him to the IR if they rostered him first, and then he could come back after several weeks. I think that's maybe how it works. I think the pup is only on preseason. It's a strange system.
Yeah,
are very arcane. But there was also Matt Bushman who had a great preseason game.
They signed to fill in for Blake Bell, right?
Yeah, and then he broke his collarbone
after catching 2 touchdown passes.
Yeah, he's going to be out a couple of weeks. He's going to be out several weeks, a couple months probably. So what do we do with him? There's also Jordan Franks on the roster. He's probably just the odd man out. Maybe practice squad candidate, who knows? But he's probably cut. So there's 5 players, 2 of whom are injured for either 4 or 3 spots on the roster.
Right.
What would you do if you were Chiefs brass?
Yeah, the injuries make it really challenging to figure out. But yeah, it seems like Kelsey, Fortson are I would assume locks. Kelvin, obviously, but yeah. Yeah, Noah Gray seems like he's been around for a little bit, right? So
yeah, I don't think they'll remove Gray either. I would say Fortson and Kelsey are the top 2, then Gray is third, even though
it
might be listed differently.
that'll probably be it though, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they'll bring somebody else in. I
don't think so either.
Yeah.
They like to run Bell as that kind of quarterback for the quarterback sneak because he played quarterback some at Oklahoma.
Right.
Because they believe they're just spooked at sneaking Mahomes because he had that freak kneecap injury against the Denver Broncos.
Because they've had Kelsey do that as well.
Yeah. I would say that Bell is the person they could. I would say drop Bell. No one, and hopefully stash him away if they want him to come back from his injury. I would do the same for Bushman. I might only keep 3 tight ends right now since only 3 are healthy and not have any injured guys on the 53-man roster. But
how they can balance that with like the technicalities of the
roster,
the other roster abilities, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they'll do. That's really a question. I think I would say they keep. Yeah, because I don't know what value an injured Bell has over, even if he's healthy half the season, over somebody else who can be healthy the whole season in some other position. And I think you have Bushman, whose injury is serious but not as uncertain as Bell's. He has this weird hip injury that he had surgery on. They aren't quite sure what's going on with it, I don't think. Whereas I think Bushman has kind of straightforward clavicle fracture, which is an injury that I suffered once upon a time. If you remember when I was in I believe the 3rd grade, I broke my collarbone playing basketball on the Briarcliff Elementary School gym, the tile floor.
Yes.
Briarcliff Elementary School gym, but
that was different from the elbow injury at the end of high school, right?
It was different. I've had several basketball-related injuries.
That was basketball related. That was outside though.
Yeah, that was outside. That was outside. I did break my elbow as well. So
that was the old group getting together for one last game.
Playing one last game before after graduation or before graduation.
Yeah, I think maybe in the summer right before college started, right?
Yeah, it was the summer. I think it was maybe right after graduation.
Because I don't know that I even heard that you'd broken your elbow until like maybe after you were even healed, because we didn't go to the same school. So
yeah, I had a brace on it and stuff, and yeah, I didn't have a cast because the way it was like it's hard to put a cast in your elbow, but it kind of split the ulna. Right there.
Yeah, it depends on the injury and how do you have to immobilize it, right?
Yeah. But anyway, that's the clavicle injury that Bushman has is threw a wrench into the plans, probably to try to stash Bushman, have 4 tight ends and maybe do something with Bell. But now we have those 2 injured players we have to do something with.
Right.
I don't know. They aren't going to run too many 4 tight end sets, I don't think.
No, unlikely.
I'd say maybe keep 3 and then try to have
Yeah.
that extra spot, because that extra spot might be the quarterback spot, that might be the running back spot. We didn't talk about Michael Burton, the fullback, but he could also probably fill in a tight end some
Yeah.
in things like that. So I would say, yeah, Burton back there as the kind of fullback, which they want to keep. So I might just keep 3 tight ends and see what how the injuries shake out, and then you can bring those guys back.
Yeah. It seems like a hip injury might be more likely to go ahead and IR somebody, but he is Blake Bell is 31 too, so he may be getting a bit far along to
Yeah,
do that with, because normally you'd stash sort of a young player if you had a situation like that. It'd just say like, oh, well, this year's just going to be a write-off. We'll come back next year and see how this works. But I don't think you can do that with somebody.
he's that old. Yeah, I don't think so.
31,
Either.
yeah.
I think this is Bell's last go around with the Chiefs, probably, especially with Fortson and Gray as the kind of young up and comers. And then perhaps Bushman as well. Bushman's only 26, I believe.
Bushman is 27.
27.
Well, what this thing says anyway. Or this is 27, age 27 season, I guess, right?
He's 26 right now. He'll be 27 in November.
Yeah, some of these sites always they list as their age.
And you know that Andy Reid loves his BYU players because
yeah.
Andy Reid also went to BYU. So he might be kept around. So we have that brings us to, I think, the final position group on the offense, which is the offensive line.
The offensive line as a whole, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll have to see how many players the Chiefs will keep on the offensive line, because that would also affect all these. So it's a lot of little pieces that fit together. And do the Chiefs keep 25 offensive players, 25 defensive, and the 3 specialists, or do they keep 26 and then that leaves only 24 for defense? It's a real balancing act that the Chiefs have to do here. This seems like a trickier balancing act than they've had in the past, because they have, I think, more good players than they've had before, or maybe players that haven't separated themselves as much. What so do you want to go by position, or do you want within the offensive line, or do you want to do offensive line as a whole?
I guess we could do by position, I guess, right?
Okay, well, we have
sort of center, I guess.
Maybe? Center, I guess this is most obvious. They're going to keep Creed Humphrey, second-year center now from Oklahoma, who was kind of an all-pro level player last year, one of the best centers in the league already.
What's the there's that ranking system that's
the Pro Football Focus, that had him as the #1 center.
Among the top maybe of all players even too, right?
Yeah, he was really good. Yeah,
I think he was at the top. Yeah.
And so he would be kept as the starting center. The backup center is Austin Reiter, who's been decent. Nick Allegretti could also play center, perhaps, as a backup role. Allegretti, of course, caught a touchdown pass in the playoffs the last year. So he's gonna. I think Allegretti is he's a backup to either guard position and center. I think he is kept for sure. I'm not sure about Austin Reiter. Maybe we can come back to him.
Yeah.
We have the starting guards of Joe Tooney and Trey Smith. Both very solid. Trey Smith, the draft pick last year out of the 6th round out of Tennessee. The only reason he dropped so low is because he had some injury issues that seem to have been resolved, and he seems to be okay now. And Joe Tooney was signed to a big contract, and he's been one of the best guards, and could even maybe play tackle if need be. So those two are going to be kept. Allegretti is the primary guard backup. So I think we have those 4 for sure: Tooney, Humphrey, Smith, and Allegretti. The starting tackles right now at the left is Orlando Brown, who's playing for a big contract. He was on the franchise tag this year. And then it seems like
so that he'll make $16.7 million this year.
Yeah. And
he himself is 8% of the Chiefs roster.
He wanted, I think, 25 or so. I think he wanted a lot more. He wanted Trent Williams type money. He hasn't really proved himself to be an elite, I think, left tackle, but he's certainly solid and much better than the backups that the Chiefs could bring in. And speaking of backups, really, they have sort of a backup at right tackle who's the starting tackle, is Andrew Wiley, who's kind of solidified as the right tackle. So that's 5 plus Allegretti. That's 6 roster spots. There's also Lucas Niang out there, who is on the pup list right now. Does he stay on this injured list, or does he go and get a? What happens with him? I think he can stay on the pup list and then be brought back later. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how all that rostering will work. Do you know if you could? I think you can miss the first 4 games if you're on the pup list.
Yeah, they have to keep him on the roster though, or does that?
I don't think they have to keep him on the roster. I think they have to make a roster spot when it comes available.
It's like a waiver for the position.
Yeah, I think so. So I think that's what they're going to do with Niang.
Okay.
So he's not going to be a roster candidate, but he's not going to be a cut candidate either. Other people that the Chiefs have on the line. So we talked about Austin Ryder as the backup center, and then we have a lot of
it seems like you'd have to have a backup center. I don't know that you'd
let's Allegretti
do it. Only Allegretti though. I don't know that you'd want to, but
I think you probably want 2 interior backups and Ryder.
Yeah,
they could probably stick in Ryder at guard too, if both guards went down.
Right.
Or one of the backup tackles, I suppose, could slot into guard. Jerron Christian seems to be the primary backup tackle right now. Darien Canard they brought in as a 5th round draft pick, but he, from what I've seen and what people have said, he seems a bit overmatched right now. So he's probably not. Maybe he's a practice squad candidate even.
Seems that way.
Or maybe they'll keep him around just because he's a 5th round pick. They don't want somebody else to pick him up.
Yeah.
The other backup tackle right now who's been playing a lot is Prince Tega Wanogo, who is probably going to be. He's kind of competing with Canard as one of the backup tackles.
Is he a Prince or is his name Prince?
I believe his name is Prince, but I'm sure his mother would say he's also a Prince.
Right. Just out of curiosity to see if you had that fact ready to go.
Well, Prince Tega was born in Nigeria, so he's technically a Nigerian prince. He was picked by the Eagles in the 6th round in 2020. The Chiefs signed him to the practice squad early 2021, and so he went to Auburn. I'd say the Chiefs will try to keep Prince Tega around. I think they have him as a higher rated player right now than Canard, but Canard was a higher draft pick, so they don't know what they'll do with him. The other guys who are on the roster, Mike Calendo and Vitaly Gurman, I think are probably both gone, and who knows if they'll. Mike Calendo is the 3rd center. Vitaly Gurman is the 3rd guard. Behind Calendo, they have listed as a right guard backup as well, but I think probably Calendo and Gurman are casualties of the roster.
They still have 22 players to cut, and it seems like if you can get 2 from the offensive line, then
I think they might keep 10 offensive linemen, and we might keep 9. So
I read something recently that there was talk that they may only keep 8 initially.
Yeah, Arrowhead Pride had an article where they thought that given the way the roster was shaking out, they might only keep 8 offensive linemen: Brown, Tooney, Humphrey, Smith, Wiley as the 5 starters, Jerron Christian, Nick Allegretti, and Prince Tega Winogo. And then Darien Canard and Austin Ryder would be cut. Canard probably to the practice squad if he would stay on the Chiefs. But Austin Ryder, if that would only be a temporary cut, and that they would cut him so they could keep Bell on the roster and move Bell to IR,
and then
pull him back.
Yeah,
which is an interesting solution.
As physical as the offensive line positions are, you'd think you'd have to have at least a couple of backups around just in case.
Yeah.
It doesn't take too many injuries before it becomes difficult to play the rest of the game that you're in.
Yeah.
Should there be more than multiple injuries in a single game?
Yeah.
It's not assuming that everybody plays all the snaps, even, right? Those are not.
Yeah, so that's what's different about the offensive line versus defensive line is that the offensive line plays all the snaps. They don't rotate like the defensive line does. So it's a different kind of position than really any other position other than quarterback on the offense, where even Travis Kelce's not going to play every down, but the center and the guards and the tackles ideally are going to play every down for you.
Right. And then this particular group has stayed relatively healthy too. So they may try to roll on that until they have some reason to think otherwise that but they're going to get through another season without any too many injuries anyway.
So somebody of Ryder, Canard, and Prince Tega Winogo are probably going to have to go. At least one or two of those three are probably not going to make it, but
maybe those are the lower salary groups. From these players too. So.
I feel bad about not including Kalindo and Gurman as possibilities, but from what I've read, I haven't seen them considered starters or fighting for jobs or things like that. So I think those guys are probably camp bodies at this point.
Yeah,
maybe latch on to the practice squad and can work their way up. This is kind of what happened with Allegretti. Mm-hmm. He was a late round draft pick as well. He was kind of worked his way into starting sometimes, into getting being the sixth offensive lineman in goal line situations, things like that.
Right.
He's playing fullback even occasionally, I think. So that's offensive line. Any more comments on that?
I think we should move on to the defense.
All right, let's move on to the defense.
Do we need to even mention the special teams players?
We could.
Or so we know who they are and they're going to be on the roster.
Yeah, Harrison Butker, Tommy Townsend, and James Winchester, the long snapper, are going to be on the roster. Butker as kicker.
All locks. No possibility of being cut, right?
No, because they don't have any competition on the roster. So
right.
We might say that maybe Harrison Butker technically has Justin Reed as competition as the backup kicker, but I don't think anyone's thinking that Reed will supplant Butker as one of the best kickers in the NFL. But it's nice to have a backup kicker, because I don't know if Townsend really is a kicker or not, but if you have a backup kicker, this allows Townsend to stay as the holder.
Right.
And Reed as an emergency kicker until if Butker got hurt, I don't see Reed sticking around as kicker for games after that. I think if Butker gets hurt, you find another spot for a second kicker.
Yeah.
So anyway, those special teams specialists are definitely going to make the team.
Now those are out of the way, we can move on to where would you like to go next?
Well, we can start with the line. We can start with defensive end.
Sure.
Right now it seems like,
assuming Frank Clark is a lock.
I assume that Frank Clark is a lock. I assume that Mike Dana is a lock. George Karlaftis also a lock, since he's the first round draft pick.
And played great in that preseason too.
Yeah, he's played great so far. He's gotten sacks every game just about. He's got a really high motor, it seems like. Dana was a draft pick, 5th round 2 years ago, who's kind of worked his way up. Frank Clark, of course, is a very high salaried player on the Chiefs, and he was instrumental in the Chiefs' playoff performances in the last couple of years. kind of underperformed in the regular season. Sometimes some people have said, but he's definitely going to play as well. And then we have Carlos Dunlap, who was just signed from the free agency. He's going to play.
Mm-hmm.
He might be the leader in sacks this year for the Chiefs. He had 8.5 last year for Seattle and kind of spot duty veteran. And then we have some people on the bubble. I'd say the Chiefs keep probably 5 defensive ends.
Yeah, 4 for sure.
4 for sure.
Maybe a 5th. Yeah.
Maybe a 5th. And the 5th, people battling for the 5th are Joshua Kando, Malik Herring, and Azur Kamara. I think Kamara is going to be the low man of those 3. So I think it's either Kando or Herring battling for a potential 5th spot if there is a 5th spot. Do you have any opinions on whether it's going to be Kando or Malik Herring?
So from the salary perspective, the Herring is the lowest salaried of the group, so it seems like that would be the odd man out.
Kando was
him last year, right?
Kando was picked as a 4th rounder last year, and
he had some playing time, I think, late in the season even, but I'm not sure that he did a whole lot though.
Malik Herring was also signed last year as an undrafted free agent. He would have been drafted, but he tore his ACL in the Senior Bowl. So he played for Georgia. So
it doesn't mean anything. That's too bad.
So I don't know who they keep between Herring and Kando. I think Arrowhead Pride had Herring as the keeper, but they say nobody really knows.
If the team thinks that they're like equivalent to each other, Herring's $230,000 cheaper. So if they're the exact same player, you can save $250,000. You're probably
and you might think that Kando has a better chance at landing someplace else on the roster if you think that's what you want to do. If you want to do something nice for him, I think he's a 4th round pick last year. He's decent. He might be able to latch on to somebody else rather than the practice squad. I don't know who they keep, but Herring, it seems like the Chiefs like both of them kind of equally, and one of those 2 though is going to get cut at least. I could see both of them, but probably they'll try to keep 5 defensive ends because you got to rotate those guys in and out.
They do rotate, yeah. There's usually 2 on the field at a time, right? So 5 seems like so you have 2 sets of 2 plus a 5th for to spell somebody, right? Or cover for an injury, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
And probably special teams and also potentially.
Yeah, I think it's the same for the defensive tackles. You have 2 normally, and then you have you'll rotate those. Although you keep Chris Jones in probably most of the time, so it's possible. I guess they could only keep 4 defensive tackles, but I think it seems like they'll probably keep 5. Although there's a lot more. We have so right now with Chris Jones as defensive tackle, they tried to move him out to end a little bit last year, which seemed to not really work out very well. That's what then they.
Right. Defensively, the team didn't start playing well until they moved him back inside.
Yeah,
and then everything seemed to go right back into being a serviceable defense as a whole, right?
Yeah, so
positional move.
He needs to be in the middle. He's one of the best. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. Not named Aaron Donald. Maybe who knows if Aaron Donald's going to be playing the first few weeks, given his practice antics against the Bengals. They're practicing against the Bengals, weren't they? When he was swinging the helmets at them.
Yeah. Why do they even have practices with other teams? It doesn't seem like they should probably do that.
She used to do that fairly regularly.
Yeah.
When they had the camp up in River Falls, you remember that? They had that kind of cheese league that they would have Green Bay come in or have Minnesota come in. Yeah, I don't know exactly either. I guess it's more like a game than like a practice, but it's also the negatives are it's more like a game than like a practice, and other teams will
Right.
see what you do.
Tempers may run hot like a game then too.
Yeah, yeah,
It really did.
and they do enough, I think, in practice. You see fights in practice all the time, even among their own teammates. So,
Right.
um,
It does happen. Seems like every year
yeah,
in several camps there ends up being some kind of fight, right?
yeah. The Bills have had some. I know this year they've had other problems in their camp as well, given the Matareza situation and other things going on.
Yeah, that's not great. You don't want to hear that. But yeah, that sounded really terrible too, because they sounded like they knew about it, but they didn't do anything. Like the Bills knew, like from
Well,
months,
I think a
that
lot
this
of
is a
other teams did
possibility.
too, and that was why he wasn't the first punter taken, because
Yeah,
he was like so above and beyond. It seemed like every other punter that was out there, but he wasn't the first punter taken. Everybody was wondering why wasn't he taken ahead of these other two punters in the draft.
yeah,
That may have been why.
it very well could be. And I
Even
guess
if
the Bills did release him now. I guess right.
he did raise them, I guess we don't know whether he's guilty or innocent or anything, but it's still pretty troubling. And yeah, the Chiefs punter Tommy Townsend, we don't have that problem with him. We might have he's not as talented as a punter probably as some of those other guys, but he's been other than his long hair maybe injured, he's been a pretty good citizen for the
That we know of anyway.
Chiefs. Hippie. So back to the defensive tackles. There's Chris Jones is going to stay. Probably Derek Nottie also as the other starter. Then there's Colin Saunders, Turk Wharton, Danny Shelton, Taylor Stallworth. Both Shelton and Stallworth were brought in as free agents. And then there's also Matt Dickerson and Kahinde Ojini Hassan. I would say Dickerson and Ojini Hassan are probably out, and potential practice squad candidates. That leaves Stallworth and Shelton as probably battling for the last spot. And
if they keep that many, even right?
If they keep that many, but they brought in Danny Shelton fairly late in camp.
Yeah, because what the Chiefs would have two defensive tackles on the field.
Yeah,
we have a 4-man front, right? So
yeah, Shelton is a huge run stopper. He's 345 pounds.
Good sized guy.
And he was a first round draft pick by the Browns. He's kind of bounced around on different teams, but I think he is somebody that will plug up the middle. I think that Shelton has the inside track over Taylor Stallworth, although Stallworth was signed earlier, but Stallworth doesn't have quite the pedigree that the Chiefs. I mean that Shelton has. He's only 305 pounds, so he's down. And again, I think if Shelton, if you look at him, he might be 350, 360. He's a really, really big guy. And he's been a starter most of his career. Stallworth has only started 2 games over the course of his 4-year career with New Orleans and Indianapolis. So Shelton has been injured the last couple of years. So he's when he's played, he has started. Shelton also brings back the Samoan heritage of defensive tackles that the Chiefs have had success with, going back to Dan Saliamua. Remember Dan Sal? You remember Saliamua? Oh yeah. Shelton's mother is Samoan and his father is Peruvian. That's an interesting mix.
Yeah.
It's Daniel Silupumoni Shelton. So I think they're going to keep Danny Shelton. I think they're probably means Stallworth's the odd man out, but they might put him on the practice squad.
Yeah,
those defensive linemen get hurt a lot because of this physical nature of the game. But
right,
if they keep 5, I think this is one of the easier position groups to say what they're going to keep. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like keeping 5 makes sense with the same reason to keep 5 ends, right? So if you've got two on the field at any time, you're gonna swap 2 with 2, plus 1 more to fill in as needed, right? So
Yeah, I think like Shelton maybe as a specialist for like a short yardage situation,
yeah,
goal line situation. Maybe you want a really big fat guy to be fullback in a Dontari Poe type situation.
right,
I Shelton is I think they wouldn't have signed him so late probably, or wouldn't have signed him if they didn't think that they didn't need somebody
right.
like him.
And they signed him not out of like undrafted free agent status. It was they actually signed him
Yeah.
as an a player that's already been in the league, right?
Yes. He got signed on August 15th, so he got signed 2 weeks ago. So I would say they want to keep him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, nobody's like from that group is super like underage, very extremely young. They're all 26, 27, 28, 29 years old, right? From the group there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
nobody's super old, nobody's super young either though. So
Yeah, they're all kind of in their prime and veterans, or at least young veterans at this point.
Mhm. Yeah, and Chris Jones, just so you know, $29.4 million due this season.
Yeah, so they got a lot of money tied up with Chris Jones. So
14% of the roster is his salary alone.
yes, so he's going to be 3 touch. He's been all pro. At least second team all pro behind Aaron Donald. But yeah, he had 15 and a half sacks back in 2018. He's had at least 7.5 the last 4 years. So from a defensive, if you get that production from the defensive tackle position,
in the middle, yeah, that's pretty.
Is pretty impressive. And so he's one of the top players in the league at his position for sure, and one of the better defensive players in the league. So it's Jones and then whoever we can find to kind of piece around.
Right.
Um,
how about the secondary then? Should we move into the linebackers?
Yeah, let's move to the linebackers. Yeah. The Chiefs actually also have a good young linebacking core, it seems like.
Oldest guy's 27 years old.
The oldest guy is 27. Yeah. Who's the oldest linebacker?
Jermaine Carter.
Jermaine Carter. He might be the odd man out, actually.
He's also the most expensive linebacker too. 1.2
yeah, and that's
million.
Yeah. What's his cap hit? Does it say?
1.77.
Okay, so that's a decent size, but it's not as big as some.
Right.
But I think the top 2 are definitely Nick Bolton and Willy Gay.
Mm-hmm.
Both drafted by the Chiefs. Bolton was the second round draft pick last year. Willy Gay was the second round draft pick, I believe, the year before that. There's also Elijah Lee, Darius Harris, Leo Chenal, a third round draft pick this year. And then there's
they seem to like, I guess, from what I've read recently. Chenal.
He's what?
They seem to like him.
Well, they seem to like him. Yeah, they drafted him in the third round, so they hopefully they like him somewhat.
He's only 22 also. So
yeah, young. And then there's Jermaine Carter and Jack Cochran, who seems to be definitely the low man on the group. He's listed as the third string.
he's the lowest salaried player in the group as well.
Okay, so Cochran probably out, and then they'll probably only keep 5, even though sometimes they start 3 linebackers technically in a 4-3 defense. But given the way that most teams play now with multiple wide receivers, the team is in the nickel most of the time, so they'll have 5 defensive backs and only 2 linebackers. And so Gay and Bolton will probably get most of the snaps at linebacker, and then we'll have a few others rotate in and out depending on situation, pass rushing, things like that. So from what I have seen, it seems like the Chiefs will probably keep Gay, Bolton, and then maybe also Elijah Lee, Darius Harris, and Leo Chenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to make sense.
And Jermaine Carter, who was actually just brought in as a free agent, might be the odd man out.
You get another trade potential though, or or I think they'll just have to release him.
I think they could trade him. He was a starter for Carolina for much of his career, but yeah, I don't know if he has room. I don't know if there's room for him here.
Yeah, and I know that I was disappointed to see that former Iowa State Cyclone Mike Rose was released earlier this week too.
Yeah, he was.
I guess there's been talk about him potentially making it onto the practice squad.
He could make it on the practice squad. I think the Chiefs have when they drafted Chenal, they didn't really have too much room for anybody else probably in the linebacker room. And
Mike Rose was the 2020 Defensive Player of the Year for the Big 12 Conference.
Ooh. So do you think they released him early so they could sneak him through waivers and be able to pick him up for the practice squad?
It was one of the first things I thought anyway, so I'm kind of hoping for that scenario. Hopefully he'll catch on somewhere if the Chiefs don't end up trying to grab him.
Yeah, I hope so too.
But he's a really solid player though defensively for Iowa State. So can't always guarantee that they're gonna transfer to those skill sets to the pros, but you hope they will at least anyway.
Yeah,
he did. He was I think tied for second on the team in the final preseason game with tackles, which was pretty good. So
he seems to be a sure tackler at least. Maybe not as athletic as some of the guys in front of him.
Not quite as big, I think, too.
Yeah,
but yeah, he was that Cyclones defense was known for their tackling prowess. And at least getting the job done, holding them up until somebody else can come over and finish the tackle, or just making the tackle outright. So it was pretty fun to watch. That defense was pretty good for a couple of years there.
Good, yeah. They've had a good team the last few years. They had some good running backs, Breece Hall and David Montgomery for the Bears.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So hopefully Rose will maybe sneak on in the practice squad for the Chiefs or latch on somebody else. So that means they've kept 5 defensive ends, 5 defensive tackles, 5 linebackers, 15. And then does that mean we keep, I think, possibly 4 corners and 4 safeties, or do you keep 5?
5 and 4 maybe.
5 and 4.
Yeah, which is 5, which is 4, something like that, right?
I think probably 5 and 4, because then that would make 24 total.
Yeah,
probably 5 corners and 4 safeties. I would say you probably don't have as many 3 safety looks as you do 4 corner looks. So 5 corners. Let's start with the cornerbacks first.
Sure. And that still leaves for 2 extra slots for the offense then, right? So 26-24 split, you think, for?
I think maybe that's the way it's going to shake out, because when we've been going through this, we have a lot more questions on offense than we have on defense.
Yeah.
Injuries and things like that. So I think having 26 offense might be the way to go here.
Or maybe even 27 offense.
27, 23.
It's possible.
That would be that we would only probably keep 4
and 4 maybe for the first secondary.
Yeah, or 4 seconds. They probably want more for the secondary though, because I would say that's in the passing NFL, you want to keep as many guys as you can,
especially in the AFC West too. It would be a very quarterback heavy offense.
Yeah, exactly.
Division,
but you also want guys rushing the passer too. So
trade off.
But I think the secondary is going to be important, and so I'd say probably five corners. There's L'Jarius Sneed, who's a lock for the roster, one of the best young corners in the game, probably. Rashad Fenton has been very good when he's been healthy. Trent McDuffie was the first-round draft pick this year. Joshua Williams was also.
Well, it seems like they would give McDuffie a chance, even if they weren't happy with his performance in preseason. But he seemed fine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he does seem like he has been pretty good in camp. He's on a concussion protocol right now, though, so it might be a little. But the first game is until September 11th, so that's a ways.
Right.
away. So even if he's had a bit of a concussion, he should be ready by that point.
But the cut day, the final rosters have to be set Tuesday, right?
Yes.
August 30th.
Yeah. So I think they'll probably just keep him on the roster, and then if something happens, they'll make a turn for it. Joshua Williams is also a corner.
Mm-hmm.
He was a 4th round draft pick this year. Jalen Watson was a 7th round draft pick this year.
What about probably the best name on the team now?
DiCaprio Bootle. Maybe the Chiefs will even keep 6 corners. I could see that happening too.
I think Bootle had gotten some playing time towards the end of last season too.
He did. Yeah, out of Nebraska, named after, we assume, Leonardo DiCaprio. At least that's what I assume. He was undrafted though, out of Nebraska last year. He ended up he has a 4.38 40-yard dash, so he's a very fast guy. He's somebody that could also maybe be seen as a returner, I believe. So there's Bootle. We also have Chris Lamons or Chris Lamons, although he's maybe kind of a corner or a center kind of hybrid. Although he was involved in that fight incident that Alvin Kamara was involved in, wasn't he?
Oh, maybe right.
That's what I remember. He was questioned by the police. He was in connection with an alleged assault that also included New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Lamons turned himself in. He's got some legal issues right now. But he was a good special teams player last year. He downed some punts. So Dave Tobe likes him. But that could be a reason not to keep somebody too.
Right.
Frank Clark also has legal troubles with his gun lovingness.
Yep.
But they're not going to drop him because of salary cap implications.
Right.
And there's Nazee Johnson as well, who's on the mix. So, do they keep 5? Do they keep 6? Do they keep? I think they keep at least 5, but I don't know if you would keep. I think you have Snead, McDuffie, Fenton are the definite 3.
Right.
And
they seem to like Bootle with his playing time towards the end of last year, and it seemed like he played quite a bit in the last preseason game too, from what I saw.
Okay.
But it seems like maybe he's the 4th.
It's hard to say. That Joshua Williams has kind of looked outmatched at times as a 4th round draft pick out of Fayetteville State. Jalen Watson was a 7th round pick. I think ideally both of those guys they would like to see on the practice squad, but they're probably not going to be able to stash both of them there. Well, Williams was a 4th round pick. Watson was a 7th round pick out of Washington State. So he played at a little bit higher level. So I'm not sure what they'll do there. They picked him 7th round for a reason, probably enough. Watson is 6'3", 204 pounds, a big guy for a corner.
That's pretty big for a corner.
Joshua Williams is also 6'3", so they're getting some tall corners. Lamons is only 5'10". Trent McDuffie is only about 5'10" too. That was one of the
knocks
against him.
Yeah.
He's such a good cover guy though, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, how many corners do you think they'll keep? 5, 6?
Probably 5, what I would assume.
So you would say they would probably try to keep Bootle as number 4, and then one of Williams or Watson or Lamons.
Is it Lamons or is it Lamons? Or?
I heard them say Lamons
really
on TV, but I would think it was Lamons, but
yeah,
I heard them say Lamons on TV at one point during the broadcast. But I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't remember. I remember hearing I thought I heard his name was Lamons last year, but I'm not quite sure. It's sort of like the question: what is Travis Kelce's pronunciation of his name? Is it Kelce?
Right. But I thought that one was funny with Andy Reid because he just abbreviates everybody. It's like Kels is just a shortened version.
Did you see that his brother said it was actually pronounced Kels in an interview, but they weren't sure whether it was real or fake.
I wouldn't trust any of that. But I don't know, Andy Reid. I think he was just saying it like short.
Yeah, I think Andy Reid just cuts it off, like
just to make it one syllable.
Yeah, just cuts it off. But like, yeah. But I think though that perhaps because it's spelled Kelce, so it might just be pronounced
right.
So it's hard to say what some of these names are pronounced. And it's individual. I would have I said Lamons last year, but I thought I heard it said Lamons this past one of the preseason games. So I'm unsure about his pronunciation. Chris, I got down pretty well.
Turns out you were wrong about that too. Christ. Anyway, but yeah, from salary wise though, Watson and Johnson are the two low financial burdens, I guess, for the team anyway. So they're seemingly more likely to go, practice squad or release.
Yeah, I don't think they'll release Watson because he's a draft pick. I think practice squad perhaps is a 7th rounder. I would guess maybe they'll try to keep Williams because he's a 4th round pick. But it seems like he's been picked on a lot in preseason. So I'm not sure what they'll do with him. You want your 4th round draft picks to be on the team. But
right.
But once you get below 3rd round picks, really it's hard to predict what they're going to be.
Well, the expectation isn't as high, I think, right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes they do like to keep the guys around that didn't necessarily play well in preseason to see how they respond if they bounce back or become more of a sponge and take on more coaching. Then those guys are the guys that they really like in the long run. I think it's the guys that didn't necessarily play well, but then have a chance to bounce back and see how they react, and then if they react the way they want them to, then they will find a spot for them.
Yeah.
And they've done that. They've got some history with that.
Yeah, so it's hard to say whether they'll keep 5 or 6 corners, maybe up to 6. But then if they keep 6 corners and 4 safeties, that would mean that they have 25 on defense, only 25 on offense. And then the offense has all this like iffy kind of question marks. So, but defense, it seems like probably you're more likely to be injured if you play defense than if you are offense. You might want to keep at least as many on defense as you do on offense. So
yeah,
and I'd say more defensive players probably play special teams,
for sure,
than offensive players. But that kind of varies.
Well, maybe we should take a look at the last section here of the safeties and then see what we think after that.
Yeah, I think safeties seems like this is a little more cut and dried like the other position groups, except corners question mark.
Yeah,
on defense. Safeties we have Juan Thornhill, 2nd round draft pick a few years ago. Definitely going to be a starter. Justin Reed came in to replace Honey Badger as the other starting safety. Definitely a starter. Locks also it appears as the backup place kicker as well. Very smart guy, Justin Reed. He went to Stanford. He's a chess player. Did you know that?
Did not know
that. He played chess quite a bit. Yeah, he's a athletic and very kind of brainy player. Not just somebody who would just be called football smart either. I think, which is certainly what Teron Matthew was. But I think Reed has more of the kind of classic brain intelligence.
What was the score on the Wonderlic?
I don't know. Let's look it up. Justin Reed.
We got Reed and Thornhill locks at safety, and then the next 2 guys down, Brian Cook, Dion Bush.
I don't see a Wonderlic score for Reed.
Maybe he didn't participate.
He may not have taken it.
What about Brian Cook or Dion Bush though for safeties?
Yeah, I think those are probably the 2 backups. Brian Cook was a 2nd round draft pick this year. Dion Bush was, I believe, brought in from Chicago as a potential backup safety. So I think he's probably a good special teams player.
He's the oldest of the safeties, 29.
29. And then we have Devon or Devon Key and Zane Anderson as the numbers 5 and 6. I think Key is probably out, and let's hope Zane Anderson is out. He was really the kind of Daniel Sorensen of special teams last year. He had several big mistakes on both special teams and defense. I'm sure they're going to try to sign him to the practice squad, and he's going to get some late season playing time anyway. But I think those two are going to get cut.
Yeah. What happened to Sorensen though? How is he not on the roster?
I believe Daniel Sorensen went to New Orleans and got picked up by the Saints. Fortunately, because Steve Spagnuolo loves Daniel Sorensen. Fortunately, Ben Neiman also was kept away from Spagnuolo's depth chart as well. So I think in some ways the Chiefs have addition by subtraction on defense here. They do lose the Honey Badger, who was very good, but maybe losing a step and not quite in sync sometimes last year. But I think not having Sorensen, not having Neiman as a linebacker, that really helps. Those were the two worst players the Chiefs had on defense, at least the ones that were constantly being picked on and missing assignments and being too slow to cover guys. So I think, and Zane Anderson was the third one of those three amigos, and let's hope that he had a big penalty against the Bengals in the regular season game that cost the Chiefs really the win, because it was a kickoff return touchdown by Pringle, I believe. And I don't think there was a block in the back or something that Zane Anderson, and I don't think it really would have mattered on the return, but cost a touchdown, and that was a close game. The Chiefs didn't play well in the second half. They kind of fizzled after that play, and then of course they fizzled in the second half again against the Bengals, which I still blame on Zane Anderson. I want to squarely place the blame on Anderson. And if Matt Bushman makes the team, he's from BYU. We don't need to have Zane Anderson also from BYU on the team. Sorensen was a BYU guy as well, you might remember.
Right. Andy Reid will be happy with
one BYU.
With having at least one BYU guy. Yeah.
So I think we have Thornhill, Reed, Bush, and Cook as the four safeties.
In the preseason, the Chiefs' frontline defense had been pretty great. Actually, they no points allowed. I think all punts is what was allowed by the first string defense. So it seems like they're playing a lot faster, a lot more aggressive. And some of those, addition by subtraction may have helped there, like you mentioned. So far, that's
so far
preseason. I don't know if that means anything at all, but they did seem to be moving faster and were more aggressive for sure. So hopefully we'll see that continue. Yeah, if you were in charge of the Chiefs, you would have sent Sorensen away a long time ago.
I would have sent Sorensen away. He made some splashy big plays, but I think that was only because he had so many opportunities to make big plays because they were always throwing his direction. So a broken clock is right twice a day. Kind of situation for Sorensen. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was a little more that Sorensen could kind of come up with big plays and not be burned quite as much. But he was always burned on big plays, it seemed like, even throughout his career, but not as often. He did not as often make up for it in the last year or two that he was playing. So I'm glad to see Daniel Sorensen go. Although he did have some great plays and some big moments for the Chiefs, and he was an adequate player for much of his career, but I think the Chiefs' defense right now is a little better off without him.
I know I always like to message you when Sorensen had a great play, just to make sure. You were personally annoyed by the fact that Sorensen had a good play. I knew that you were annoyed by it.
I was annoyed by Sorensen. I was annoyed by Neiman. Those are my two negative players.
Sorensen and who?
Ben Neiman.
Oh yeah.
They were not quite up to the level of my distaste for Jordan Love or Taysom Hill on other teams, but as far as the Chiefs went, they were the thorns in my side.
Yes, exactly.
So does that wrap up our?
I think so. I think that covers it pretty well.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up shaking out. We'll know on Tuesday what happens with
Yeah.
the roster, whether they keep more offensive players or more defensive players, what they're going to do about the quarterback situation, what they're going to do about the tight end situation, given the injuries.
Right.
I think the offense is a little more up in the air than the defense at this time.
Maybe we should judge how well we've done this by how many offensive players, how many defensive players we think the final split's going to be. Maybe that's what we should.
I think it's going to be 25-25.
Oh, really?
I do. I think they'll drop one of the tight ends. I think they'll only have 9 offensive linemen. So 9 plus 3 is 12. That leaves room for 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, and 6 wide receivers. So that's 25. 6 plus 3 plus 4, 13, and then plus 3 plus 9, 12 for 25. 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. If you remember from Clue.
Yes.
One of our classics. What do you think?
I think we'll probably end up. I think because there's so many wide receivers that I think they like, and they are a pass-heavy team. I think they're going to end up with one more receiver than we probably assume.
Interesting.
I think it'll be a 26-24 split. Would be my guess.
So that means they might only keep 4 ends or tackles, or 4 ends or tackles, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, I'm not great at predicting what the defensive, because I can't evaluate the defense as well. It's statistically it's not easy to like.
It's harder to see. Yeah, it's harder to see what their contributions are unless they're making bad plays. And you say, oh yeah, there's Zane Anderson. Let's just get rid of him.
I really only like to judge after I see somebody do something terrible.
Yeah.
To know that person isn't good.
Kick the person down at their worst moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kick them while they're down at their worst moment, I guess is what I meant to say.
Is that not what you did say?
I meant to say that. I mean, maybe it came
was close anyway. That's how I heard it anyway. So whatever. That's fine.
We'll not edit that part out.
No, it's staying in for sure. All of this is staying in.
Well, we had to, other than a couple of misstatements and grammatical miscues, we've had a pretty good overview, I believe, of the Chiefs roster, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday when they go down to 53 from 75. 22 guys will be unfortunately looking for new jobs or trying to latch onto the practice squad. It's a tough game, tough world out there, not just on the field but off the field for these guys, and it's hard. We treat them as if they're just people that we can shuffle around as like cards, but they're actually human beings that have hopes and fears and dreams and all sorts of things like that. So I would feel bad even for Zane Anderson if he we're cut, even though as a football player he's caused me a bit of grief. So I wanted to say that to be fair. But anyway, this has been the Morning Truck Power Hour. He has been Dr. Aderscaff. I am Dr. Michael Werman, once and for all. And please like and subscribe to our podcast galaxy of channels that we have now, apparently, and also or watch our YouTube channel. We'll still be on there if you want to see our shining faces as we discuss the issues of the day and the issues of some other day. And with that, we bid you adieu. Good day.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. I nailed that one.